Hey there, everybody! Shalom from Israel. This is our final shiur number 10 in this historical, groundbreaking series. I really feel that way because I think that these things by Rav Kook, the kind of ideas we're delving into in this series, they are rarely taught in English and definitely not accessible on the YouTube, and I'm very happy that we've been doing this. Actually, the shiurim in English, they're parallel to the Hebrew shiurim that I give, the same series, and there were a couple of shiurim in which the English version even surpassed the amount of views compared to the Hebrew edition. So that's a good thing. And thank you for being in this with me. And we're now on the 10th and final shiur. We actually completed the letters of Rav Kook to Dov Ber Milstein, but we still have three things to do, and we're going to try to do them in this concluding shiur. The first thing we want to do, I promised you that I'll share with you the fate of the Milstein family, what ended up happening with these kids that we've been discussing. They're not really kids, even in the letters. They began when they were well into their teens and proceeded to the stage in which they were in their early 20s. But what ended up happening with the Milstein family? And the second thing, we have a few more sources that I wanted to study with you, and we're going to study them here as well. And specifically, this will be part number 3 in this year. We're going to get into the often quoted, at least in Israel and in Rav Kook circles, letter 144 by Rav Kook. Why it's so important, what it has to do with this series, we'll explain all that in the third part of this shiur. So, part number 1, what happened with the Milstein family? The truth is disclaimer, the truth is that it doesn't really matter, because the idea of these letters are understanding Rav Kook's thought process regarding Hador, regarding the generations, regarding the times we're living in. And he specifically said it. We mentioned it a couple of shiurim back at the end of letter 332. He concluded saying, "May these words be for the joy of your honor's heart," meaning you, Mr. Reb Milstein, "and the heart of all who fear Hashem, who truly await His salvation." Meaning Rav Kook knew that he was writing these letters not only to Milstein, but also to all those who fear Hashem, meaning this was an opportunity to get his ideas into writing and into the depth that he went into in these letters. So therefore, I'm saying this because some people might say, let's see if Rav Kook's method works. Let's see what happened to the Milstein kids. It doesn't really matter. Everybody knows that statistically, even if you have a good theory, it's not going to be 100% foolproof. And some people will succeed with it more and some less. And there are other factors in life, except for the father's approach to things, and therefore this isn't really a test of the ideas of Rav Kook. But since we got into this history of the history of this specific family, so I think I owe you an answer to the question, what happened to them. So let's get back to the years, the process. In 1882, Milstein's firstborn son was named Chaim Ze'ev. Okay, he's not mentioned in the Igrot because he was okay, meaning he continued the education. He was a Parisov Chassid, just like his father. He made Aliyah to Eretz Israel, joined his father in Eretz Israel, and he has hundreds of descendants. And I'm going to mention a couple of them later on. And they became Ger Hasidim. They began as Parisov, like we said, but Parisov is very similar to Ger. It's also geographically close in the old country. So that's one branch of the family, and we didn't really deal with them. The other two kids, one was born in 1886. His name was Shmuel or Shmulke, In Polish, that was Stanislav Milski. Milstein became Milski. The way the Polish names all got a bit changed and alternated. And he was a banker. He was the chairman of Poland's national bank. They didn't really have much of a nation, but in the few years that they existed as a sovereign nation, he was an executive. He was the chairman of the national bank. And in 1889 was born Naftali Milstein, and he became a statesman, an international statesman. His name was Anatoly Mulstein. The Milstein became a Mulstein, and we'll get into his story immediately. I thought, before I got into the research, I thought that maybe Dovber Milstein, the father, was like an older guy, and therefore the generation gap was wide between him and his children, but that's not the truth. He was actually born in 1855, meaning he was a father in his 30s, and that wasn't the problem. But like we said, in all of Klal Yisrael, there was a big gap between those two generations. A lot of people leaving their frum upbringing. When his two younger sons were aged 13 and 16, they were sent to yeshiva in Kolibel. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And remember that the family originated in Warsaw. But even before they were sent to the yeshiva, in Warsaw, they were already influenced by socialism and the rising tide of Polish nationalism. Shmulke, he was the older brother, and he was the more rebellious one, and he apparently influenced his younger brother Naftali, and both of them were kicked out of the yeshiva. I can only guess that they weren't really into the yeshivish vibe or studies, and therefore they were expelled. I can't judge if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but that is the fact. And they started dedicating themselves to secular studies. In 1905, they participated in the failed revolution against the Russian Tsar, and they even hid some explosives in their father's warehouses. If you remember, Dovber Milstein was into the lumber business, and he was doing very well, and he had large warehouses for the lumber, and they hid bombs. I don't know if he was told about this ahead or not, but they hid some bombs in his warehouses. In 1906, Dovber Milstein had the rare opportunity of coming to visit then Palestine under the Ottoman rule for a 2.5 month expedition. And that was when he met up with Rav Kook, and that was the beginning of the correspondence that we've been studying for the past shiurim. And the brothers wound up in France, and France was, of course, the Jews there were very secular, the emancipation and everything, So Naftali ended up marrying a non-Jewish woman named Suzanne Dumont. They divorced pretty quickly. At age 24, he publishes a work called, it says here in Hebrew, Hidbolelut Politika Vekidma, about assimilation, politics, and progress. And in that essay, he, by the way, I should mention that I was assisted greatly in this research by Reb Ari Shvat. I don't know him personally, but I understand he works in the Rav Kook museum, Beit Rav Kook. And he brought a lot of this information that I'm sharing with you to light in an important article. Anyway, so in this essay, Naftali Milstein, he attacks his brothers, the assimilated Jews, for deserting their Jewish brothers. So that means that even when he was assimilated, he was still feeling a connection to Klal Yisrael. He wasn't the kind who turned their backs totally on their people, though of course intermarriage is a very bad thing. But in 1919, he returns to deal with Jewish stuff. He becomes an executive at the JCA, which was the Jewish Colonization Association. Don't tell Tucker Carlson that there was an organization called the Jewish Colonization Association. Of course, it isn't what it might sound like today. It was the Baron Morris de Hirsch. It was his initiative. There were two Baron Hirsches that were active in resettling Jews. One of them is called Hanadiv Hayadua, the known donor and benefactor of Eretz Israel, very, very important and influential figure here in Israel. And I think it was his cousin. He opened the JCA trying to resettle Jews mainly in Argentina and Canada, and also a bit in Eretz Israel. So Milstein's son was working there. And then there's a dramatic change when in 1920, 20 or 21, Milstein, the father, we said he was relatively wealthy. His financial status went down the sewer. He lost a lot of his money and his business. Some of it was robbed. Some of it was just, the changes in the economy. And then his sons, we remember in the letters that we were studying that he was helping out his sons financially, and now they become his helpers. And in 1923, he makes Aliyah to Eretz Israel. And where does he live? For the first few, maybe weeks or months, he lives in Rav Kook's house. Rav Kook would sometimes provide housing for new Olim who couldn't find a rooftop for themselves. Afterwards, he moves and he lives in Batei Varsha. There are certain neighborhoods in Yerushalayim. It's not exactly a neighborhood in Yerushalayim. Every 2-3 streets can be called a neighborhood. But there's Batei Ungarin, the Hungarians, and there's Batei Varsha, people who came from Warsaw. Even after they made Aliyah, they wanted to live together with people with a similar background. In 1924, his son, Chaim Ze'ev, we mentioned him before, he joins him there. And good news, Mazel Tov, in 1932, Naftali marries again, this time with a Jewish woman, and her name was Diana, and she was the great-granddaughter of the Baron Rothschild, the we mentioned before, the great benefactor who helped rebuild Eretz Israel. So this time he's like... I just saw President Trump recently in Hanukkah discovering that one of the guys in his staff is not only Jewish, but he can also recite the brachot. And he said, hey, you're seriously Jewish. So Naftali Milstein becomes, again, after he was not seriously Jewish, he becomes more seriously Jewish. He gets married. They have a Jewish, what they would call a ceremony. Rav Soloveitchik said not to use the word ceremony for halachic matters, but I'm not sure it was totally halachic, but it was a Jewish ceremony in a shul at Paris. And he then travels to visit his father in Yerushalayim, and he buys him a nice apartment near where the place that used to be called the Edison film theater. And so he's helping out his father now, and he bought him a little apartment. By the way, we have wonderful Divrei Torah penned by Dov Ber Milstein, Divrei Torah of Rav Kook from Seudah Shlishit. Apparently, Rav Kook's strongest delivery of Divrei Torah and shiurim was in the Seudah Shlishit on Shabbat in Yerushalayim. All the great Talmidei Chachamim of Yerushalayim would come to his house, and he would apparently say real Divrei Elokim Chaim, deep stuff, and some of it is written in a book called Shmuot HaRe'aya, and the guy who penned it down and summarized it was Dov Ber Milstein. So this is very interesting, at least to me. Anyway, so that was in 1932. In 1935, so we have, wait a minute. Yeah, we got Antol, we called him, right? That's the other brother, right? Antol, let me be sure I'm getting this right. Because we said that there was Shmuelke and Naftali, right? No, Naftali was Antol. All right, what happened in 1935 anyway, his main supporter in the Polish government passed away, and then the Goyim started giving him trouble. because just as Rav Kook said in his letter, warn your children that they're not really going to be accepted by the non-Jewish world, and when things will change, they'll turn against them, and therefore they should be true to their school and connected to their people and to their identity. And in 1940, this guy, Naftali, he leaves France. This is World War II, of course, and it was very dangerous to be a Jew in France, which was conquered, of course, by the Nazis, and he manages to escape from France to New York. And his family, his descendants are still living in the United States. I understand that two of them, I don't know if they're totally Dati today, but I understand that they're at least close to Shmirat Mitzvot. So if we want to conclude with Naftali, well, like, you see that Rav Kook, in his case, what Rav Kook said was good advice. He stayed connected to Am Yisrael. He did drift afar, but then he came back, and he has the Jewish descendants, and some of them are even, remember Rav Kook always says in the letters, even what he doesn't do, then in the next generations it'll happen, and at least with some of his descendants, apparently it is happening. So at least partially, this advice worked with Naftali. Now, Shmulke, he also married a non-Jewish woman, and he was also in France, but he didn't think it was so urgent to evacuate France, and he ended up being arrested and sent to a death camp, and there he lost his life. So this is like the Joker, maybe not the perfect word use for such a sad matter, but this might be the game changer in Jewish destiny and history, meaning suddenly the Shoah happened. It happened to many, because we're speaking about processes and natural processes of education and of generations and what's gonna happen, but there are also unexpected twists in history, and the Shoah, it was unexpected, even by Rav Kook. True, he took Hitler's threat very seriously when the Nazis came into power, and Rav Kook was towards the end of his own life, but he did much for the Jews in Germany, and he advised to take it seriously. And yet, that's not enough to say that, as some of his good-hearted Hasidim believe, that he really envisioned the Shoah. Nobody in those years, excuse me for saying this, I think in those years, like in 1933, 34, when it was relevant and Rav Kook was still alive, even Hitler and the Nazis didn't really envision the Shoah, meaning they hated the Jews and they wanted to get them out of Europe, but they didn't have the whole plan of the final solution and totally wiping everybody out, literally, and destroying everybody. Sure, they would be happy if it happened, but it wasn't really planned yet in the early 30s. And therefore, nobody really envisioned, maybe Jabotinsky, but that was in 38. What can I tell you? Everybody understood that it was dangerous. The future of Jewish life in Europe was at peril. That everybody understood. But the scope of it and how bad it would become, I don't think that people really could predict it. And that, of course, changed in the dynasty of many families. First of all, many were totally wiped out, and others, it had all kinds of effects on them. I think the Shoah became the most important factor in Jewish life for like at least the two generations after it. Maybe today it's becoming a bit less than it was when I was growing up. But of course, that changed a lot of things regarding Jewish identity, meaning that even if you have all kinds of theories and rational ideas and logic and everything, there can be things that happen in life and in history that are game changers, and you can't really tell how life would look like if that didn't happen. So again, through the story of a specific guy, this Shmulke Milstein, we're understanding something fundamental regarding Jewish history in general. Anyway, interesting. Another interesting fact. After the establishment of the State of Israel, so you probably know that Ben Gurion offered Albert Einstein the job of president of Israel. Einstein said, thank you, but no. But similarly, he offered Naftali Milstein the role of it's in his Hebrew it's Sarachutz, Secretary of State, right? That's what you call him. So, like I said, because he was such an important figure in international politics, Ben Gurion offered him to be Minister Sar HaChutz, and in charge of foreign relations of the young state of Israel. There was probably some politics involved with that, and Ben Gurion probably was trying to not give the job to somebody else. It's always a mix of, in the world of politics, of the great grand thoughts and the small petty ones. But anyway, he didn't take the job. He wasn't such a warm Zionist. He said that God didn't intend the Jews to grow orange groves in general, but orange groves. This is an important thing. This shiur is being given on Tu B'Shvat. I'm about to, at the end of this shiur, I'm going to go to my vineyard to work in my vineyard and later in my groves. So I take offense by this. But a lot of the intellectual Jews in Europe, they look down at the Zionism because of Zionism called for people to work in mundane things. Today it's a bit different, but in agriculture, and they would say what the Jews are going to become tractor drivers and work in because in the non-Jewish world the farmers are like they have a low status and they're not considered very educated. In Israel, it's a very special thing that even highly intelligent and talented people would work in such things, especially at the beginning of Zionism. But Milstein didn't feel for that very much. He also didn't think that Israel would easily survive, surrounded by so many Arab enemies. And Baruch Hashem, we're alive and kicking. And that's pretty much it. I also should say that while I was reading this stuff, I was reading a Facebook post that some guy into Rav Kook's history, Moshe Nachmani, wrote, and I saw all kinds of, regarding the Milstein sons, and suddenly I saw a like by somebody, her name was Miri Milstein. I requested her permission to mention her name. She had no problem. And it turned out that Miri Milstein, she's like the great-great-granddaughter of Dovber Milstein. For me, it was very exciting to actually speak with a real Milstein, because I've been teaching these, studying and teaching these letters for decades, and suddenly to speak with a Milstein. And interesting, she used to be a Ger Chassid. Her family was they were Ger Chassidim, like I said. The branch of Chaim Ze'ev have many descendants, and they became Ger Chassidim. She today is not religious. She left the world of the Chassidut, but she does do. She does take people on tour in Bnei Brak and chuln tasting and all kinds of stuff like that. So that's Miri Milstein, and she connected me to her father, and her father's name is Avram Yitzchak Milstein. So I got all excited because I was saying maybe Avram Yitzchak Milstein was named after Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook because of the connection between the Milstein and Rav Kook. But I talked to him, and that he was named Avram Yitzchak for other reasons. So my theory was deflated. And anyway, it's very interesting. He did know to tell me some stories about the last years of Dov Ber Milstein. He said he was blind, but he knew Mishnayos by heart, and therefore he would just recite Mishnayot, and that was the way to see if his sons were near him or not. He would just make a mistake deliberately in the Mishnah, and if one of his sons noticed and it was there, then they noticed. They were also fluent in Mishnah, and they would correct him, and thus he would know if they were there. I would think it might be easier to just ask, hey guys, are you here? But that was the way in the Milstein family to know who was in the house and who wasn't. And that's the end of the first third of our shiur. That's what happened with the Milstein family. So you see that some people, they deserted orthodoxy, but they started coming back a bit. And you see also the opposite, that the branch that was Haredi, you see at least one of the girls, she's today is no longer observant. So we have these trends, and they're affected by many, many factors. And like Rav Kook teaches us, our job is to keep everybody aboard and a part of the Jewish nation, and believe in Klal Yisrael, and believe in the holy neshama of every Yid, and therefore believe that even if they stray away, it's temporary and they will come back. But in order for that to happen, we have to keep them a part of the Jewish nation and collective consciousness. All right, now, the second part, I said we still have some sources to deal with. I don't know how much I said it specifically in the English shiurim. I don't remember, but one of the reasons that I've decided to deliver specifically this series in our Beit Midrash of Binyan Torah, which you should join. We have a WhatsApp quiet group, and you have a link to it in the comment section. Not the comment section, like there's a detailed section beneath the YouTube entry for this shiur, and you can join our English speakers group. It's a quiet group, and even I'm quiet in it, meaning I don't post every week even, but it is a way to hear about new shiurim, divrei Torah, and stuff going on in Israel. Anyway, so why did I mention that? Oh, so the reason I decided to deliver this specific series in our Beit Midrash is partially because there's a trend in recent years in the Israeli Rav Kook circles of giving Rav Kook an upward kick. That's what I call it. In Hebrew we say, livot betorat, livot klapei mala. Sometimes you promote somebody, yeah, but it's actually you're trying to get rid of him. So in recent years, we have been seeing too many examples of people who came from Rav Kook's Beit Midrash, but they seem to be pretty hostile. Hostile, extremists, even I would say zealots, which is a bit crazy because the zealots in Rav Kook's biography, they were the ones who were attacking him. And suddenly we have people speaking in the name of Rav Kook, and they themselves are acting like zealots. I'm not saying that it's the majority, but I'm saying that there are trends. And we have to understand why this happened. And it happened because, as usual, whenever you take something to one extreme, you have people trying to return it to the other side, and they go to the other side in an extreme way. What happened is that because Rav Kook was such an Ohev Israel, and because he had so much patience and so much emunah on everybody, and because he was so positive in his approach towards the Zionists and towards the secular Jews and everything, so it ended up neutralizing too many of the disciples of Rav Kook, meaning too many people started, look, in public life, and especially when it has political implications, in public life, you have to stand your ground. All right, you have to also be sometimes negative and say you have to sometimes be critical. So some of Rav Kook's disciples and students and people influenced by his thought system, they became a bit too soft if it's regarding religious matters or national matters, not being able to hold their ground in the big disputes and things going on in Israeli society. And therefore, there began some kind of a reverse movement trying to remind people that Rav Kook was a full-fledged Rav. And though in his theoretical writings, he could be very, very positive regarding even things very problematic from a Jewish perspective. Excuse me. Yeah. Though he could find the positive side of even things that are very negative from a Jewish perspective. When engaging in practical matters, he knew to fight for what was right, and he was very critical of the secular part of the secular Zionism movement. I mean, ideologically, and all kinds of other things, and on halachic matters. As a chief rabbi, there's a difference between him and the people speaking in his name today, because usually what used to cause Rav Kook to become very midat adin and you know, conflictual, whatever. That would be only regarding religious matters and not politics. And today, most of the people doing this in Rav Kook's name, what gets them mad are usually political matters. So even in that, they're not like Rav Kook. But like I said, there began a movement in the yeshiva world influenced by Rav Kook, wishing to remind people that Rav Kook, he wasn't like wish-washy, and he wasn't a moderate, I would even say. Depends how you define that term. And you know, he was totally committed, and he fought for what he thought was right, and he could fight against things that he thought were destructive to the future of Klal Yisrael. Up to this point, I wholeheartedly agree. But you know, like we said, when something goes too far to this side and people are trying to balance it, they don't go for the middle. They often take it to the other side, and then they started explaining Rav Kook's philosophy as if, like, forgetting that the foundation of it was positive. And like Rav Tziyuda said in 2 words, if he had to summarize his father's teachings, he said, Ahava ve'emunah, and the large emphasis on Ahava and Ahavat Israel, and seeing the positive side, and not speaking badly and about other parts of Am Yisrael, and believing that everybody is a piece of the puzzle and we need each other, and you know, that's the basic Rav Kook. So I think these letters helped us understand more regarding who Rav Kook really was and what his approach was to things. And I want to share with you another two sources here. The first one is a letter to his friend, a Kabbalist, Chabad Chassid named Rav Pinchas HaKohen Lintap. And Rav Kook liked him very much. And he says here in letter, it's on your source sheet, letter, I don't remember the letter number. I know the page number is 305. And in the first volume of Rav Kook's letters. And Rav Kook says thus: we must add one further point. All the laws, all the halachot, maybe we should say, all the laws and halachot concerning hatred and their stringencies, meaning there are certain halachot of hatred against Jews who are going against the Torah way. All right, we're not going to get into all of them, but we have the Poresh Midarkei Tzibur, he who is not living actively like a Jew, and we treat him in a negative way according to halacha. And there are all kinds of halachot that you know, the dark side of the Shulchan Aruch regarding people who are not observant. When I say the dark side, I mean that as a joke. I mean the harsh stuff, not that I'm chas v'shalom. This isn't criticism. I'm just saying there are the halachot which are very rough regarding people who left the way of Torah and mitzvot. And Rav Kook says regarding of all these laws, all these halachot concerning hatred and their stringencies are applicable only to an individual whom we have certainly and properly rebuked. Shekiyamnu bo mitzvat tochecha. There's a mitzvah in the Torah of tochecha, of telling somebody that he's not behaving well. Hocheach tocheach et amitecha velo tisa alav chet. If you see somebody straying away, you gotta talk to him. You gotta try to change his ill ways. Okay. And Rav Kook says only after you're mekayim the mitzvah of tochecha, then you can refer to in a negative way. You're even obligated to be negative towards somebody who left Torah observance. But, however, says Rav Kook, since in our generation and for many generations prior, according to the testimony of Rabbi Akiva, we have no one who truly knows how to offer such rebuke, and mishiyodea leochiach, this is a Gemara. Rabbi Akiva says in the Gemara, it's a Braita, of course, Rabbi Akiva says in this Gemara that we no longer have people who know how to do this mitzvah. Meaning the mitzvah, the full mitzvah of tochecha is not just going up to somebody and say, you should observe Shabbos, you should eat kosher. That's not considered mitzvah tochecha. Tochecha is understanding his whole story, and it's explaining to him and teaching him the emunah and teaching him the why behind it and showing him the beautiful ways of the Torah and understanding what's causing him specifically to stray away and understanding his whole psychology. That's the full mitzvah of tochecha. And you need a lot of IQ and EQ and a few other cues to do this well. You got to be a wonderful educator. And Rabbi Akiva said, we don't have people like this anymore. It also might have to do with the things that we've discussed in these letters, that the times they themselves are changing. That's also a big limud zchut, and that doesn't mean that it's okay to stray away, but it means that we have more understanding for people who chose this path. Whatever might be the full explanation, says Rav Kook, we don't have people who know how to do. Says Rabbi Akiva, and Rav Kook is quoting him. The entire basis for these laws has collapsed. He says in the Hebrew version, Nafal puta bebira. Nafal puta bebira is taken from the Gemara. And the Gemara in Shabbat 66b, you have it here on your source sheet. It says that Habanim yotzim biksharim, meaning the question is what you're allowed to leave your house with. If there's no eruv, you're not allowed to carry, but you're allowed to take things that are like remedies. And the Mishnah says, even if it's folk remedies, not something your doctor would prescribe, but things that people believed. It's not like the Mishnah is saying that these things work. They're just saying if people believe they work. So like there were certain nuts that people used to take. And the Gemara asks, what kind of nut? What are you talking about? What are these nuts? And then Rav Yehuda says they are garlands of the madder plant, and they're tied for their medicinal qualities. So this is some kind of a plant that people used to tie on their garment, and the Mishnah says that you're allowed to walk with this thing, walk around on Shabbat carrying this, and it's okay. And then Abaye quotes his M. Interesting, in the translation here into English, this is from the Safaria, it says mother, but she wasn't his mother. It was like it says here, his foster mother. There's Ima and there's M, and he used to call his foster mother M. So anyway, she said to me that if you use 3 of these garlands, then they maintain the illness, and if you use 5, they heal the illness, and if you use 7 of them, they're effective even against sorcery, meaning they also give you protection against something else. Like we said, it's not that the Gemara says that this is necessarily true. It's just saying that people believed in it, and therefore we could allow it. And then Rav Acha Bar Yaakov gives a list of things that, this is only if these garlands hadn't looked at the sun and the moon, meaning they weren't exposed to the sun or the moon, and does not see rain, and hears neither the sound of clanging iron, nor the sound of the hen, nor the sound of footsteps. There's a whole list of conditions for this to indeed work, and thus says Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, he says, Im kacha, nafal puta bebira, meaning your medicine, your matter or your medicine, it fell in a pit. Meaning that if there are so many conditions for this to work, it'll never happen. And this is what Rav Kook says about these halachot, the harsh halachot regarding secular people, non-observant Jews. Rav Kook says all the laws that incline toward anger and fraternal hatred have become like the biblical portions of the Ben Sorer Umoreh and Irani Dachat, and according to the opinion in Chazal that these things have never happened and they never will happen. They're not realistic at all. There are too many conditions. So if so, why are they written in the Torah? Why is you have the Ben Sorer Umoreh? He has to be executed by his parents. It's a terrible mitzvah. Like we said, according to at least one opinion in Chazal, this never happened and it never will. So if so, why is it written in the Torah? And it says in that Gemara, drosh vekabel sachar. It's something for us only to study and not to practice. And Rav Kook says, when the Gemara says this, it doesn't mean that it's just, so we have some more material to study. It's as if the other halachot and mitzvot and gemarot, that's not enough. We need another few pages in the book of the Talmud. No, that's not what it means. It means that the reward for this theoretical study is immense. It acts as the salt that preserves the nature of goodness by reinforcing the hatred of evil in all its forms. Meaning, you don't have to hate the evil people, but you have to hate evil. Ohavei Hashem sin'u ra. And the way to educate you to hate evil and leaving of Torah and mitzvot for the Jewish nation, that's existential for us, and therefore we consider it not just an individual preference or something. We consider this rishut. It's a bad thing. It's an evil thing. But says Rav Kook that the way to educate people about the hatred of evil is by learning these things. Meaning, when you learn about the Ben Sorer Moreh or Irani Dachat, it's a city you have to tear down because they were all idol worshippers. You have to understand that Avodah Zarah is a terrible, terrible thing, and Emunah in Hashem is a very important thing. And says Rav Kook, and this is a brilliant explanation. He says, because we study these things, we don't have to do them. Meaning, by taking so seriously, the business of Torah and Emunah and Mitzvot, and studying these things and saying, even the harsh things about people leaving it, that raises enough people in the Jewish population to keep it alive. And it prevents true destructive wickedness from ever taking root in reality, because there will always be enough serious Jews who won't allow the straying away to totally take over. And therefore, we don't have to execute these harsh practices as they're described in these halachot. Now, this is a very interesting commentary. Source number 2 for the second part of our shiur is in Orot Yisrael 4:4, and Rav Kook says here, all that which appears in the teachings of the written and oral Torah, that might seem to diminish the love for the people of Israel, meaning these exact halachot which the zealots love to quote all day long. Halo misanecha Hashem esna. We hate the people that hate Hashem, and all kinds of other quotations, and Poresh Midarkei Tzibur, and all kinds of harsh sayings in the Torah. Rav Kook says all of these things together, even in relation to the most confirmed sinners, are in fact nisyonot ubeirurim. They're trials and refinements for a person, meaning it's a trial for you. Just as Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem said, let's wipe out all, this is now I'm speaking here, this isn't Rav Kook, but it's in his spirit. Hashem says after Chet HaEgel to Moshe Rabbeinu, he says, let's just wipe out all these people and start a new nation from you. And Moshe says, Chas v'sholem, and he's, with Mesirut Nefesh, he protects the people. And that's what Hashem wanted him to do. It was a nisayon for Moshe Rabbeinu. Hashem put him in trial, seeing if he has enough Ahavat Israel to defend the people of Israel, even when they do Chet HaEgel. So that's what Rav Kook says. All of these sources, it's not that we can just, negate them and say they don't exist. Of course, they're part of our Torah perspective and outlook. But the question is, when you sum everything together, because what's your conclusion? And he says these are in fact trials and refinements for a person. They're designed to help one ascend to the supreme level of Ahavat Hashem, bless Yidbarach, until one finds a path through all these apparent contradictions. Which contradictions? He's speaking about the contradictions between all the positive mitzvot and stories of Ahavat Israel and loving every Jew and believing in everybody and extending a helping hand on one side, and on the other side you do have some harsh sources regarding people straying away from Torah. He says you got to find a path through all these apparent contradictions, and the love for Israel and the love for all of creation will remain alive and vibrant in one's heart without any diminishment or doubt whatsoever. So Rav Kook isn't a reform a rabbi, chas v'shalom, saying, we don't believe in this stuff anymore. He's just saying you have to put it, it's a part of the equation, but it's only a part. And at the end, the conclusions should be full of Ahavat Israel. And what he says about Torah in general, I wish to say regarding Torah Rav Kook specifically and especially. True, you can find a few stories and a few sources in Rav Kook which seem to be very hard-hitting against the sinners and everything, and we're not erasing them. That's part of Rav Kook. And if you don't know these sources, you don't really appreciate his character in full. And yet, if your conclusion from everything you learned about Rav Kook and in his writings is to be so harsh and negative and, I don't want to say full of hatred, that's the extreme, but sometimes you even see, well, whatever, that wasn't Rav Kook, and that's fake. And that's even chutzpah, because, if you want to introduce this way of thought, then it should be using your own name and not taking Rav Kook, who was clearly opposed to these views, and trying to make him the champion for your negative and derogatory language and approach to other people and groups in Am Yisrael. So that was the second part here. And by the way, Rav Kook himself said, Mutav she'ikashel be'ahavat chinam me'asher besinat chinam. Meaning, it's better that I will make the mistake of loving somebody I shouldn't have loved, ahavat chinam, and not of hating somebody that I shouldn't have hated. Meaning, sometimes you do have to have the negative force, which we will sometimes use the harsh word of sin'ah, but you probably don't know how to do it. And therefore, if you're going to make a mistake, it's better to make the mistake of ahavat chinam and not of sinat chinam. And you can't use Rav Kook's thought system in order to promote a whole atmosphere of sin'ah, chas v'shalom. Last but not least, the third part. Wait a minute. No, there's another source here, and this is regarding different parties in the political system, because I can't give you the whole historic background, and we already actually mentioned part of this. So I'm just going to read Rav Kook's wonderful words. He says, from my aching heart, this is after there was a big machloket, and he was in the heart of it because he was defending somebody who the left wing in Israel, in pre-Israel, they were blaming him for the murder of a politician, Chaim Arlozorov, and Rav Kook knew that he wasn't guilty, and therefore he was trying to get him off the hook from, and he succeeded in this because he was going to be executed by the British. You know those people who say, I'm not going to get into it, and then they get into it? Well, I'm one of them. Anyway, so that caused a lot, since in the left they believed that this guy was the murderer of Arlozorov, they were very angry at Rav Kook for defending him. And Rav Kook, though he was the big unifier, he found himself in those years, in the late 20s, early 30s, in the heart of a big machloket, and they thought that he was taking the side of the right against the left and everything. And of course, Rav Kook was closer to the right, both religiously and in the national views, than to the left. But look how he writes about this. From my aching heart, which grieves for the fractures among my people, I respond to your esteemed letter. I call heaven and earth to witness that my affection is immense, truly with all my heart and all my soul, for our entire people, for each individual, and for all its factions. Because there's some people who they can find Ahavat Israel to the individual Jew, but not to a group or a party or with opposite views. This is because I believe with perfect faith that every part of them is a unique limb in the holy and wondrous spiritual form that is Knesset Israel in its fullest sense. Meaning, it's different from the liberals. Well, the liberals don't have much patience for other views, but at least theoretically they speak about that. But Rav Kook, it's much deeper. He's saying it's not just because they're family, because they're Jews like me. It's because they're all part of the puzzle. The puzzle is Knesset Israel. Knesset Israel is the inner spirit of Am Yisrael, what makes us a nation generation after generation. And therefore, just as in your body you have different limbs, in Am Yisrael you have different sensitivities that create groups that form around those sensitivities. And Rav Kook says basically every part of them is a piece in the puzzle. And therefore we need each other. This is Rav Kook. This is the depth of his thought. And this is what makes Rav Kook unique. It is clear to me with absolute certainty and complete faith that even from amidst the factions that contradict one another, meaning you say that everybody is part of the puzzle, but sometimes the parts, they don't come together. You have total contradictions between the right and the left, between the liberals and the conservatives, between the more religious and the secular, and these are contradictions, right? And Rav Kook says, it is clear to me that even from amidst the factions that contradict one another, an everlasting edifice will be built around the counsel of Hashem, the Redeemer of Israel. And from this structure, our complete redemption will be established, meaning everybody has a piece that we need for the total and whole form of Am Yisrael. And therefore, we're not willing to give up on any part of Am Yisrael and any faction and any party. Now, does this mean that we agree with everything? Of course not. Of course not. In every faction, in every movement, there are certainly things with which I cannot agree. But this can never cause the love. Those are specific details. Maybe this faction has taken the fundamental good part that we all need and translated it into all kinds of perspectives and views that we oppose because it's unbalanced and therefore it's coming out in the wrong way. That's Rav Kook thinking. But this can never cause the love which burns within me like a blazing flame for our holy people and for every one of its members to be diminished even by a hair's breadth. This love remains within me in equal measure for those who honor me and for those who scorn me. I love them all without limit. You cannot attribute to a person who penned these words, and this is Rav Kook in Yerushalayim as the Rav Rashi, because part of the Zealots' theory is that Rav Kook, maybe when in Jaffa, he was more positive regarding others, but as the chief rabbi in Yerushalayim, then he was like a hardliner, and he was a hardliner in many ways. But like I said, till a certain limit, it was important to take the steering wheel back. I personally participated in that, and I'm not ashamed of it at all because things were going too much to the weak, soft side. All right, but you got to get it back to the middle and not take it to the extreme. And like I said, you can't attribute to somebody who writes this in the late 20s, early 30s. You can't turn him like upside down and take him out of character. It shouldn't be done, and it's not honest. Last but not least, the third part. There's a specific letter that they love to quote. It's letter 144. And we don't have enough time to get into all the details that I prepared to teach this Igeret, this letter, but it was written in 1908, exactly the same time frame of the letters we've been studying in this series. And Rav Kook is writing this letter to Yoshua Shechnovitz. I'll explain. While studying the letter, we'll understand why the extremists like quoting it, but also why they're usually wrong in their interpretation because they take it out of its real and true context. So this letter was written to Yoshua Shechnovitz. Shechnovitz, he was the editor of Haredi, Orthodox, but modern Orthodox newspaper in Frankfurt am Main. You have in the source sheet, I've found on the web, I found a picture of his matzeva and tells a bit about him. And Rav Kook is writing to him in 1908. And apparently, Shechnovitz, he was a reader of a newspaper which was popular in Russia. It was called, in Jewish Russia, it was called Het Hazman. And in it, he apparently read something very bad that happened in Eretz Israel. Remember, I think we discussed this in one of the shiurim. The first Aliyah, it was mostly consisted of either religious, observant Jews, or at least traditional or close to it. They were definitely not anti-religious. The anti-religious Jews started making Aliyah in the second Aliyah, meaning in these years of like 1908. And they were the ones who changed the atmosphere of the Yeshuv in Eretz Yisrael. The Yeshuv in Eretz Yisrael of Jews till like 1904, it was traditional, basically traditional. And from 1904, it started becoming more and more non-traditional and even anti-religious. And that was that changed the whole atmosphere and caused modern-day Israel in 1948 to be born as a pretty much secular and distant from Torah and mitzvot. That, of course, caused many of the Haredim to be against Zionism, more or less, but not to feel for it. We know these historical processes. So that was beginning in these years. And apparently, there were some po'alim, some workers from the non-religious and anti-religious population, and they were working in one of the moshavot, and something happened. Believe me, I spent about 3 hours reading this, because you can find it today on the web. I read these old newspapers of Het Hazman. There were fascinating things that I discovered in 1908 that were going on in the Jewish world, but I didn't manage to find this incident. But there was an incident described in this newspaper, and Shechnovitz from Germany, he was shocked by what happened. Now, I did find a different clipping, and I put this in your source page, of, I think it was something similar. When they discovered on Pesach, they found that in one of these guys, he had chametz. And the Rav, it says in this article, he didn't remember selling this guy's chametz, which is a way to maybe cynically say that, of course, he was eating bread and Pesach, and he was kicked out of the Moshava because that was unacceptable in the Jewish Moshavot in Eretz Yisrael. So apparently something happened with a group of workers, which was probably similar to this incident. And Shechnovitz wrote Rav Kook to complain, and Rav Kook says, yeah, I've investigated into this clearly, and behold, the breach caused by the young people was in a manner more disgraceful than it's described in the aforementioned newspaper. Apparently, Shechnovitz was gently attacking Rav Kook and saying, look, you want us to support Eretz Yisrael? Look what's happening in Eretz Yisrael. It's in the paper. And Rav Kook was a very truthful man. And therefore, not only did he not try to deny it or play it down, he said on the opposite, I got into it, and it turned out to be worse than it was described in the newspaper. So something really bad happened there at the Moshava, and the committee of the Moshava did, of course, its duty and decreed that no work be given to those who pain us in matters of religion and faith until they were forced to leave the Moshava. Okay, so that's regarding that particular incident. But, says Rav Kook, what concerns teaching about the whole from this, meaning if you want to understand the situation in Eretz Yisrael, what should be our conclusion from this sad, negative event? So, is that we now require great fortitude at this time, when the stream of life in Eretz Yisrael is growing stronger, to the joy of every lover of people and land. But alongside with this, Rav Kook says, we must establish a yeshiva. I got to skip a few of these sentences because we don't have enough time. Says Rav Kook, we have to unite together from near and far, meaning us in Eretz Yisrael, and from far, you Jews of Germany, to establish Gader beYehuda, to found now in the new settlement at its center, because you had the Yeshuva Yashan. In the old settlement, you had people who were very pious and very orthodox, and even extremely orthodox, but their yeshiva world was irrelevant to the new yeshuv, because the new yeshuv was bustling with energy of rebuilding the land. And the old yeshuv, they were like just studying Torah in their yeshivot, and they were living from handouts and donations. It was a totally different mindset. And therefore, Rav Kook said, if we want to change things, we got to build at the center of the new settlement a new and magnificent yeshiva. Because otherwise there were enough yeshivas in Eretz Yisrael, but this is a different direction of a yeshiva. Just like you have pioneers in the secular fields, you need pioneering in the Torah world. That's what Rav Kook always called upon people to do. We need a new and magnificent yeshiva adorned with external honor and dignity. Meaning, first thing, if we want to win over the hearts of the people in the new yeshuv, you can't look shabby. It has to be respectable, because they're trying to build something new, and when they look at the old Jewish world, which was often very poor and very, it was always like in miskenut, and that was the way the people looked, and the yeshivas looked, and the system looked, and they were rebelling against it. And Rav Kook says they are right in this, and therefore we need this yeshiva. The first thing, it has to have external honor and dignity, and influenced internally by the light of the flame of holy fire, Esh Kodesh, of the warmth of true fear of heaven, with sound intellect, and houses of study for crafts and agriculture work, Torah ve'avodah. These yeshivas, first of all, they have to be strong spiritually. They have to look good externally. And looking good externally is a whole psyche. It's not only just a detail. It means that you have appreciation for the external world, and that's what causes you to, build things in this kind of manner, and look yourself modern and mechubad, and it's a whole different approach to life. And so that's in the inner side. And it also has to include crafts and agricultural work under the supervision. So we have to teach in this yeshiva also the secular part of life, but to do it in the atmosphere of Kedusha. And therefore we need teachers who don't only bear the banner of the new nationalism, okay, which is the new Tzionut, but it has to be connected to the ancient heavens of pure faith. Meaning Rav Kook is trying to create a Rav Kook yeshiva. That's what he's saying. And he's saying this is a matter of national strategy and importance. We need teachers whose national love and political and practical education will exist and endure in the holiness of Israel. Meaning, and that's why we call this shiur a positive war. Rav Kook's ideology, he wanted to compete. He wanted to compete with the people leaving Torah. That's what we said before. It's not like he was indifferent regarding secular values and life. Totally untrue, of course. But the question is how you fight, how you compete. And Rav Kook believed in a positive war, meaning you got to collect all the true foundations in your opponent's thought system and educational system, and bring them into your Torah life and system. And when you do that, you're going to create a way of life and a way of education and a way of a belief system that will attract other people to join it as well. Because the reason that they rejected the traditional views, some of those reasons are correct, and therefore we got to correct them. So we got to study from them what's causing them to stray away, and we got to fix those things in our own system. So that's why Rav Kook says we need in the heart, in the center of the new yeshuv, we need a yeshiva which combines Torah and Avodah, which combines Kodesh v'chol, but it does it totally out of Emunah, which is Zionist, but religiously Zionist. Rav Kook believes that the inner spirit of all of Zionism is Kedusha, it's holiness. But we need a movement that practices this and doesn't neglect the inner spirit. Rav Kook believed it was a contradiction to speak about Jewish nationality without being connected to the Jewish sources. This is one of the best sources, by the way, in Rav Kook to understand this. And he says, Rav Kook, if we manage to do this and succeed, we will raise the banner of Israel in Eretz Israel, meaning of Am Yisrael in Eretz Israel, in the entire world, and a lot of good things will happen. Wow. All right. And then we get to the main paragraph, which is quoted often. And you, sir, I'm honored to inform you. אתכבד להודיעך. כי זה לזמן הגון אשר בחנתי דרכי, or דרכי. I've been examining my ways for a long time now, and I know with certainty that all hope for the settlement of Eretz Israel and all hope for the sprouting of the horn of salvation for Israel from Zion depends on this mighty point, that good forces gather to us to engage in the spiritual and material building of Eretz Israel. Meaning, you guys, the Orthodox in Chutz La'aretz, you left me, Rav Kook, and a few guys here in Eretz Israel alone. We can't fight this alone. We got to get together. That was, by the way, the idea behind Rav Kook's political movement, which didn't really succeed, but he establishes a movement after the Balfour Declaration and calls it Degel Yerushalayim, trying to unite all the religious people in Klal Yisrael to start building Eretz Yisrael in the way that we believe. That this is Rav Kook's positive war. I didn't make up this term, positive war. I didn't bring in the sources, but it's mentioned a few times in Rav Kook's writings. Milchama chiyuvit, because there's a negative war in which you're fighting against somebody and explaining how bad he is. But Rav Kook, though sometimes you have to do that, but he primarily he believed in a positive war, meaning not putting others down, but building your own way of life and being an example, and that will attract other people to, because you're solving the problem. The reason that they left is because there was a problem, and you should be the solution in your life and in your educational system and everything that you're doing. That's the way to change things. And therefore, says Rav Kook, this is essential, because Rav Kook understood that though there were very few Jews living in Eretz Yisrael in 1908, he understood that this population will be the foundation of the future Jewish state. And therefore, we have to influence, just like in planting. Like I said, this is Tu B'Shvat for me. This is a wonderful preparation for my work, which I'm going to soon do in my vineyard and groves. It's very sensitive and delicate at the beginning when you just plant the seeds, and you got to take good care of it at the beginning. Says Rav Kook, this is the stage where we're at, and he was totally correct in this. This is the stage we're at in the rebuilding of Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael. And therefore, it's very important to give the correct treatment to the plants. And in Am Yisrael and in Eretz Yisrael, this reminds us maybe of Mashal HaKerem in Sefer HaKuzari. So the correct treatment is also spiritual. And therefore we got to come together, all the good forces in Am Yisrael, to engage in the spiritual and material building of Eretz Yisrael, specifically according to the foundations of the culture, advancing with giant strides in Eretz Yisrael as in the entire world. Meaning you got to work with the modern world and culture, which is making so much progress in the world. You can't use the old Yeshuv's worldview and practices. That won't work. And anyone whose heart in his heart burns a true spark of fear of heaven cannot possibly ignore the call to come to the aid of Hashem, lavo le'ezrat Hashem and His people. So Rav Kook is actually asking for help. He says, don't send me these clips of bad things going on in Eretz Yisrael. I know that bad things are going on. These are moshavot under my jurisdiction. I want you to be a part of the solution, not just stand on the bylines and complain and send me these articles. We need to correct the situation. And he gives a very interesting example. Too bad we don't have enough time to really get into this, but at least in a nutshell, our dear brothers, the faithful believers among the children of Ashkenaz, the Jews of Germany, who follow in the footsteps of the great mind, the exalted Nazir of Hashem, the Gaon Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch of blessed memory. Here Rav Kook shows true admiration to the figure, the historical figure of the Rashar Hirsch. And this is interesting because anybody who knows the more inner teachings of Rav Kook knows that he and Rav Rashar Hirsch, they're opposites on in many ways. And though Rav Kook opposed a lot of the views of Rashar Hirsch, he had a lot of admiration for the fundamental change he made in Jewish Germany, which is Torah im Derech Eretz, which is the foundation of the whole modern Orthodox movement. And this is very interesting because Rav Kook wasn't so much of a modern Orthodox person himself. He would come out today to be more of the classic Haredi type in his lifestyle and maybe not in his thought system, which was much deeper, as we can see. But he wasn't your typical modern Orthodox, and he didn't study at a university, and he wasn't a rabbi and a doctor. That wasn't his thing in life. But he knew how to respect that. And he understood that this is what is needed for our generation, because that's giving a fight, that's being competitive. And therefore, he says, look at what happened with your community in Germany. You're all disciples of Rashar Hirsch. He saved the western remnant of Israel, meaning the Jews of West Europe, through the heroic salvation by teaching of his right hand, by teaching and instructing to grasp all the strategies of life in their fullness, to establish through them the position of faithful Judaism. Meaning you have to combine, you have to take the good things in the modern world and plant them in your Torah thought and system. Wow. So Rav Kook says what he did in West Europe and in specifically in Germany, we are called to work thus in Eretz Yisrael now in our days. So this is the essence of this Igeret. It's saying that we have to, we, the Orthodox people, we have a responsibility to be competitive by changing our own ways and taking responsibility for the Yeshuv in Eretz Yisrael, and do this in a positive way. And then he definitely has some harsh sentences here. He says if we abandon the Sha'at Kosher, the opportune time, the time of opportunity, of the beginning of the settlement's development, and the physical and spiritual weakness and lack of means of struggle reach their utmost among the faithful believers in Eretz Yisrael, meaning the faithful believers in Eretz Yisrael will be weak in body and weak in spirit, and they won't be able to put up a fight for the spirit, the heart and spirit of the Yeshuv in Eretz Yisrael, and the upraised armed with lawlessness in Gentile ways. And here he has definitely has criticism for the anti-religious pioneers of his day, without any trace of the true holiness of Israel. Now this is a long sentence, that's why it's often taken out of context. So I'll just try to read the whole thing. So if we don't do our job, and they on the other hand, okay, those who go in the Gentile ways, without any trace of the true holiness of Israel, covering its shards with the dross of a falsified nationalism, with granules of history and love of language, which is what the secular Zionism definitely had a lot of. They had a lot of belief in Jewish nationalism, but Rav Kook says if it's not connected to the inner spirit of the Jewish nation, which is Torah, then it's going to be weak and it's fake. It's external. It's not the real thing. It has no trace of the true Kedushat Yisrael. So they might speak about positively about Eretz Yisrael and love of language, because that was a big thing in the Zionist movement in that stage of starting to speak Hebrew again. Clothing life with an outward Israeli form. In Rav Kook, Israeli is like Jewish. An outward Jewish Israeli form, while the interior is entirely non-Jewish, destined to become destructive and monstrous, and ultimately also to hatred of Israel, Am Yisrael, and Eretz Yisrael, as we have already verified through experience. What's he talking about? What he's saying, that if the Zionism will not be connected to its Jewish sources, then it will one day turn against us. That's what he's saying here. That's what they like in this Igeret, because this is a harsh criticism of secular Zionism. He says there's the danger. We've learned this through experience. Which experience? I think the experience of Jewish history, in which Jews who lost connection to their sources, they often became very opposed to Jews and Judaism. If you know, like figures like Benjamin Disraeli, definitely Karl Marx, we have a lot of those people. So we know that that will be the end, at least of some of the people who are totally not connected to their Jewish roots, even if they flaunt their Judaism externally. We don't see it today. We don't see it in the BDS, often led by everywhere you have people opposed to Israel and to the Jewish nation today. You'll always find a share of Jews who, some of them were even previously Zionists, or their parents were. You find this in the most right-wing families, Zionist families. If you know the family of, you have some of you have a descendant of Menachem Begin, who was, he was connected to his Jewish roots, but yet you have one of his descendants who is very much opposed to Israel today. Moshe Arens has a descendant like that. You have a lot of them. I mentioned in my book, Chazak V'Nitchazek, a guy named Miko Peled. He's one of the worst guys on Al Jazeera speaking against Israel. His grandfather signed the Declaration of Independence of Medinat Israel, and today he's totally anti-Israel and anti-Zionist. Like I said, even in Al Jazeera, he's like doing a better job than our biggest enemies in speaking against Israel, and it's terrible. His father was a general in the IDF. So what Rav Kook is saying here, it's not pleasant, but it is true. And he's warning us ahead that if we allow the Zionism flourishing in Israel to be totally disconnected from its Jewish roots, it can one day turn against us. And this did happen. All right, if this impure hand prevails, there is no measuring the magnitude of the disaster. This is something fundamentally dangerous for the future of Israel. We have to be connected to our Jewish roots. That's what he's saying here. Right. But why am I saying that it's taken out of context? Because, for two reasons. Because, first of all, he's not putting the blame on them. He's putting the blame on us. He's saying if we don't do our job, then they will prevail, and that will be a terrible thing. But note that even in this letter, which does include severe criticism of the secular components of the Zionist movement, he's placing the responsibility on us. This is a call to action for the religious part of Am Yisrael. Have we done our job historically? Did people really listen to Rav Kook? Did we try to do what was needed to be done? The answer is no. So we have a responsibility for this situation. It's not only blaming them. And the second thing taken out of context, which goes with the first thing, what is Rav Kook's solution? He's not saying that because we have this criticism, then we should always speak negatively and harshly about these people and fight them and humiliate them and make fun of them or whatever. No, he's saying we have to have a positive war, meaning build our thing to be better and to include the positive components that they do have and in which they are better. Like it says in Orot about the Nefesh of Poshe Israel, which is better than the who are connected to Inyanei Klal, which it's higher than that of the. I can't get into that. That's another whole paragraph in Orot. So this letter is definitely important to study. And if you don't understand Rav Kook's criticism about the secular ways of the Zionist movement, you definitely don't understand Rav Kook fully. But still, this doesn't allow you to become a zealot and. Because first of all, there are many other sources, and even this source is just calling upon us to lead a positive war. And I trust in Hashem that He will not let our foot slip. And everyone who trembles at Hashem's words, everyone who desires the salvation of His people and His holy land, will stand under our banner, and we shall begin to lay a precious cornerstone in Zion and to revive. He tried to do this. He established a yeshiva like that in Jaffa. But then World War I happened, And he tried to do this with the foundation of Merkaz Rav, which only partially managed to fulfill Rav Kook's dreams. That's what he was trying to do his whole life. Rav Kook is basically the saying, as opposed to Chadash Asur Min HaTorah, Rav Kook would say, Hayashan Yitchadesh V'Chadash Yitkadesh. The old, okay, I got myself in trouble here. How will I translate this? Hayashan Yitchadesh, the old will be renewed, meaning the traditional Judaism has to be learned from the newer ways of the modern world, and specifically of Zionism. V'Hayashan V'Chadash Yitkadesh, and the new world, it needs an infusion of Kedusha. Meaning, this is Rav Kook. Everybody has to learn from each other. They have their advantage, and we have our advantage, and we got to put them together, and thus build Klal Yisrael, and build Medinat Yisrael today. May Hashem be with us to raise up the ruins of our people for our generations. And you, honored editor, please join your hand with ours, and come at the head of every pioneer, for the right hand of Hashem is exalted. Don't just be a guy writing angry things in the newspaper. Participate. Be a part of the solution. Join us. That's what we need. That's what we need. And that's what we need today in Israel as well. We need Rav Kook's positive approach, full of Ahavat Yisrael, and thus we will renew our systems, our national systems, and our military, and all the different, and the Hityashvut, and a lot of Rav Kook's belief. It's already happened, and we definitely have the religious world taking a very serious part in everything good happening today in Israel. It's not only us, but definitely, like I said, and as opposed to the beginning of Zionism today we see that it's coming back together. The more Jewish side and the national side, they go together. Today, everywhere in the Jewish world, you see that wherever you see a strong connection to Medinat Yisrael, it also comes together with a strong connection to your Jewish roots. Maybe it doesn't make everybody fully observant, but you can see it happening. You can see it happening in the younger generation. In Israel, there are many examples of this, and we got to keep on going with Rav Kook's call to us, and to lead this positive war in which we're not filled with hatred and zealotry and ill thoughts and words. Rather, focus mainly on doing our thing. And if we do our thing correctly, with respect to other factions of Klal Yisrael, and learning from the good things that I'm going to stop this just for a moment, and we're going to continue in a second.